All right. So, one of the things that I realize is not a lot of people have exposure to what bodybuilding is. As I'm talking to people, tell them that I'm doing bodybuilding shows this year, they're like pretty confused about what it entails, whether they think it's powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting or strongman. They just, there's just not as much exposure to it or awareness of it that I thought there was. Obviously, when I used to have social media, and obviously like my YouTube algorithm is very catered towards competing and competitive bodybuilding, so just kind of you don't realize that not everybody has that same algorithm. So I end up answering the same two questions a ton, which is, what is a bodybuilding show, how do they work, and why do I do it? So as simply as I can explain on 60 grams of carbs today, a bodybuilding show is presenting your physique in its best conditioning possible. And there's different categories with bodybuilding shows. Each category has certain emphasis on different aspects of the physique, but generally every category takes into account size, conditioning, and symmetry. Now let's say if you're doing bodybuilding class, a little bit more emphasis on the size. I compete in classic physique, so a little bit more emphasis in conditioning and symmetry rather than size. So in classic physique, you see a lot of dudes who, they're pros or on the verge of being pros, and they're not pushing 260, 240. They're like 190 pounds, and they look phenomenal. So that's kind of where I fall into. I want to be in the classic physique class. So basically a bodybuilding show is you sign up, you diet down, you exercise, you get as lean as possible, and then on the day of the show, you need to present yourself on a stage under really bright lights with the best conditioning possible. So the tan, a lot of people have a lot of hang-ups about the tan. It's just necessary. If you're doing like a bodybuilding show outside and not under stage lights, you probably wouldn't need to be so tan. But the stage lights just just wash out all detail. So you have to be extremely dark in order for the stage lights to not wash out that detail. But basically you show up and you're separated into classes to make it as fair as possible. So there'll be like weight classes and height classes depending on what category you do. And then if you win your class, you get to compete with the other winners of the other classes in your division to see who wins the overall. The overall, as I've explained it to people, is like, in terms of classic physique, if I won the overall, you're winning like the best in show if you were like a dog doing a dog show. So that's the goal, be the best in show, get that little blue ribbon or sword or whatever they give you. So that's what bodybuilding is. There's two stages or two phases of the bodybuilding show day. In the morning you do prejudging, and then in the evening you do finals. So the prejudging is basically where most of the scoring happens, and then if you do win your class, you are scored in the evening during the finals, because that's when they compare the winners of all the classes together, and that would be considered competing in the overall. So the only way that you get graded on your physique in the evening is if you have won your class and you have to compete for the overall. Otherwise, the scoring is predominantly done in the morning, but you want to stay in the best shape possible all day long, obviously, in case you do have a shot at the overall. And the reason why I bodybuild, the reason changes all the time, I think. I started out bodybuilding because I wanted to look like a comic book character. just want to look like a superhero, right? And then it changes, and I've discovered about myself that I'm very goal-oriented, and I love structure. And being a bodybuilder, you thrive on structure. You're nailing your meal times, you're consistent with cardio, you track and document your macros, your food selection. You figure out what foods digest well for you, because everybody's a little bit different. And so being so structured, it helps me feel the best. I like the way I am the most when I have that level of structure. Also, being goal-oriented is important to me, because if I feel like I don't have big, lofty goals that I'm working for, I feel like I'm just kind of stagnant, and I don't feel that same kind of joy if I'm not chasing after something. I've set different goals in the past. Like when I was gaming, I used to set gaming goals, and when I bodybuild, I set bodybuilding goals. And when I just really am goal oriented. Even at work, I set goals for timing myself, being fast enough, being proficient enough, and things like that. So I do it because I love the challenge, and I love being goal oriented, and the structure is important to me and making me feel happy. But that changes all the time too, because I think I also like doing hard things and pushing myself past what I thought was my limit. And dieting is a great way to do that, to develop some discipline and gain that self-control, self-mastery. So I like doing hard things also, and I think that's probably, bodybuilding is by far the hardest thing that I've discovered that I feel is worth doing, right? So I've tried running. I used to run quite a bit. Never did any super crazy ones like half marathons or marathons, but I used to do like 5Ks and 10Ks all the time. I like to be competitive with those. I just think that hard things are worth doing. So bodybuilding is probably one of the hardest things that I consider worth doing. Usually people kind of like don't fully understand the reasoning of why you do something, but if you enjoy it, you should just do it. So I personally don't hunt or fish, and I live in North Dakota, where it's like 90% of people hunt and fish. It's just not something that I deem as enjoyable. It's hard, but I don't feel like it's worth it, so I don't do it. But bodybuilding is definitely one that I feel is worth doing. I was talking with somebody who really had a hard time understanding bodybuilding, and it just seemed peculiar. They just didn't quite understand why anybody would want to do that. And somebody came to my defense and saying, well, it makes a lot more sense than hot dog eating contests, and those are popular. And I thought that was true. I thought that was pretty funny. So not very many people get rich eating hot dogs, and probably equally amount of people get rich doing bodybuilding. So it's an expensive hobby, but it's something fun to do, and I enjoy doing it. But so that's what a bodybuilding show is. I'm starting my competition season on April 5th. I've got some ideas of what I'll do after that first show, but it really depends kind of on how that first show goes and what direction I want to take my competitive season. So anyways, if you want to follow along, I will try to post vlogs and stuff about the shows, so that way you can stay up to date on what's happening without having to chase me down and attend to these shows. And a lot of people who are curious about it can't obviously be there because I live so far away, or you have to travel to compete. So this is a way to keep people updated and to share the experience with whoever wants to watch. So follow along for more.